make a difference in the world.
Yeah.
So I did that for about 3.5 years before deciding that I ultimately wanted to get even more involved and jump into the political arena. Piece of journalism that I still feel is absolutely the fourth estate of a functioning democracy, which is to hold powerful people accountable and to tell people the truth. When I first started my campaign, I recognized that social media was important, but the big, real important thing in a campaign is knocking on doors and talking to voters face to face.
Looking for real stories of real people making a difference in the Grand Canyon State? Welcome to Finding Arizona podcast. We sit down with Arizona's inspiring entrepreneurs, creatives, and community leaders and give you a front row seat to their journeys, passions, and projects. Whether you're a local trying to find a hidden gem or just enjoy watching someone chase their dreams, Finding Arizona is your go-to place for authentic conversations with a desert twist. New episodes drop weekly, so hit subscribe and start exploring Arizona one story at a time.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Finding Arizona podcast. I'm your host, Jose, and as always, we bring in fantastic guests every week. A little bit behind the scenes of what's going on. I have my very first politician in the doors here, and so it's really great to have someone of this individual status. So I'm going to have a little bit of an introduction. Today, we have got a special guest who is making waves both at the Capitol and in our neighborhoods. She's a leader, a change maker, and someone who isn't afraid to roll up her sleeves for the people she represents. That's right. We are joined by Senator Analise Ortiz, from championing bold ideas to amplifying voices that often go unheard. And Senator Ortiz is bringing fresh energy and a powerful vision for Arizona's future. So buckle up. This is going to be a conversation full of insight, inspiration, and maybe a little bit behind the scenes to look at life in the Senate. So let's dive in. Welcome, Analise.
Thank you so much, Jose. I'm honored to be here.
I appreciate you. Again, I was telling you off air, it's really just a momentous moment for me. And I'm inspired by you because, again, I'm someone with a background in my personal history. I feel like you can understand a little bit more or just appreciate and empathize with. Just to give you a little insight on me, my dad's Puerto Rican, full Puerto Rican, grew up in a jungle life and then moved out to Chicago and then joined the military. My mother is Hopi, and she actually grew up on the reservation and went into the military, and that's how they met and had me. And so I spent a majority of my life on the Hopi reservation and moved down here to the Phoenix to go to ASU. So you understand that part, at least. You're a graduate yourself. And again, I just wanted to talk to you and get to know you because we met at another podcast where I was helping engineer. And it was such a great conversation that I was so impressed, and just really wanted you personally to be on our podcast to share a little bit about yourself. So that's just a little insight and an overview on what our relationship is. But again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I will ask the question that we typically ask everyone who comes in through our doors. Give us a little bit of your origin story. I know from my own research, you were here and your parents are educators. You grew up here, Saguaro High School graduate?
Yep. Born and raised here in Arizona.
Okay,
right.
Awesome. So again, give us a little bit of how life growing up here in the Valley just kind of shaped you.
Yeah. Well, I come from a big family of 6 kids, so I think that shaped me as well. And my parents are both educators, as you mentioned, and growing up, really recognized that there was a lot of injustice in the state of Arizona. I remember my parents telling me about Sheriff Arpaio waiting outside Catholic churches on First Communion days to target Latino families, and I was confused about why that would happen. I remember when our public schools started losing vital programs like music and art.
Yeah.
And I wanted to really fight back against this injustice. There was always a spirit in me to be a rebel rouser. I think part of that is because I am the fifth of the six kids, so I
Yeah.
had to defend myself very often. But I decided to go into journalism. I thought that investigating injustice and shining a light on powerful people and the decisions they were making
Yeah.
would be a key way to make a difference in the world. So
Yeah.
I did that for about 3.5 years before deciding that I ultimately wanted to get even more involved and jump into the political arena.
Yeah, it's amazing that you had such a wonderful like childhood filled with not only your family and just how amazing they are, but just again to have a backing and support from your parents who are giving you insight and just knowledge. I find it very beautiful. My parents, um, you know, they got as far as they could with their own education and endeared me to want to keep learning and told me education was so important. You have to be ahead of the game, smarter than a lot of these other kids, and it will help you propel your life into success. So, my father really tried to get me into STEM, but I ended up doing landscape architecture. Close, but we got as close as we could. But the other thing is just again, I would love to hear from that perspective of as a child who is probably that fifth child. I always hear these stories because I only have one. But it's like those stories. It's like once it gets past three, you start to lose. Like there's not many of photos of like the early beginnings of their childhood. But I would love to understand what your parents brought to the table for each one of the kids and you in particular, as far as like understanding what's going on in everyday life and what's going on in the political side as well.
Yeah, well, my dad, one thing I really value about how my parents parented was that after school, we always would have dinner around the table together. And my dad would always prompt us to answer, what's one thing you learned at school today? So it wasn't just, how was your day? It was always very specific. And he always really was invested in our education.
Yeah.
Would, you know, always be reading the newspaper. And I remember back then, this makes us sound so old, right? But like waking up in the morning to look at the weather in the newspaper.
Yeah.
And I remember my dad was always reading it and the news was always around. And so being tuned in to what was happening within our community was important. My parents are also very religious. I no longer practice a religion, but that too shaped our knowledge of our community, of what was happening within our church and within people who attended our church. So that sense of community, of education were really key values for me and for my siblings as well.
Yeah. I mean, I can't, from my own, childhood, I can imagine that being because my dad was similar in that fashion where he was like, okay, son, give me something that you are not only learning at school, but also something that you're having trouble with. Like, is there something that is hard for you that, that you're not getting or not understanding? Maybe I can help you, because I think he knew deep down that he could only give me so much, but he wanted to give me everything that he possibly could in the moments that he knew he could fill in those gaps. So I very much appreciate that as a parent now, because I look at my son who's 4 years old and I'm like, you have so many like things ahead of you, but also I fear so many things for you, but I can't control everything. I have to be able to give you the opportunity to stumble a little bit and grow from those stumbles, but also give you the opportunity to just share with me so that we can grow closer and I can shape at least a little bit of the window that is your life. And I just want to help him, like, because that smile that he gives, the giggles that he gives now, I want to keep that prolonged as much as possible. So Again, what you do, again, what you vote for, what you advocate for. I was doing the research. I was like, man, this individual cares so much, and so much of her life is scrutinized, and just like it seems so unfair. But heaviest is the burden of those who want to, fight for those things. And you have something that you're fighting for, and I truly empathize for you. I will go into now a little bit of the post education after high school, after graduating. Looking at the world, was there any particular reason you chose the route of like the journalism track? Was there some kind of inspiration behind that?
The biggest inspiration to become a journalist was that I love to write.
Yeah.
And actually, my another thing about my dad is that in high school, I was a theater nerd. And I told him when it came time to graduate high school and choose a career that I wanted to be an actress. And he said, "You're not going to make money. You need to choose something else."
My dad said the same thing. He's like, because it's so funny because I was like such a arts, like I did guitar. I was also just like, I did theater just as much. And so he was like, I know you love it. I know. And it's so good. You do a good job, but the world doesn't work sometimes like that. And I would love for you to not have to feel the burden of like the struggling artist. So please choose something in STEM, be an engineer. You're smart.
Which is a very sad thing because we should be able to invest and foster the arts, but that's unfortunately not what our country really values. And it's ironic because now as a state senator, I make $24,000 a year. So it didn't really work out anyway.
Yeah.
But I decided because I love to write that potentially journalism could be a cool thing. So my dad took me to ASU's journalism school for a tour. Yeah. And when I saw the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism, I knew right away that that's where I wanted to be. I loved the technical aspect of shooting video and editing and putting together TV news broadcasts. But then I also loved the piece of journalism that I still feel is absolutely the fourth estate of a functioning democracy, which is to hold powerful people accountable and to tell people the truth.
Yes.
And so I'm very passionate to this day about the free press. And, both of those things are what made me really want to choose ASU's journalism school. I absolutely loved it. But as soon as I got my first news job, I really knew in my heart that in order to really create the change I wanted to see, I had to do more than just report on these issues.
Yeah, it's so amazing that, again, you go from, just a simple thing as just enjoying writing, and then that kind of propels you into this world of like, the beauty that is the technical side of it, but also just the challenge and seeing the everyday, kind of truth of the world and how it affects everyday people. You want to make so much of an effect by just this one simple thing as writing, but it sometimes it's like overwhelming how much it's the world and the universe is telling you to know you have to participate. You have to if you want to make a true effect, you have to participate. And that's what I'm starting to realize more and more. And I love what I do here at podcasting and doing the things that I do. And one of the things that I've learned from my childhood, my grandfather was an elder who held a lot of the stories of the tribe, and storytelling was always a big part of my upbringing. So that's why I do what I do now. Is I feel like every story matters, and every person who has one deserves a chance at the table. So
absolutely. It is an art. Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I will go into a little bit of like your early beginnings into the politics of the world that we see you in. So first off, you didn't start out as a senator. You actually were Arizona's House of Representative. I would love to kind of see that trajectory as a whole, like what was like the conversation like for you to discuss with like maybe family members of like, hey, I think I'm going to go down this route of, politics. Like, what was your discussion like with your parents for that moment?
Yeah, well, the first important point was that there was an in between. After I left my TV news career, I started working doing communications for a civil rights organization.
Yes.
So I was
Got
becoming
that.
very familiar with the legislative process and very energized to work on state level policy. And there was a moment in 2022 when we were redistricting as a state, and there were many legislators who were leaving. And one of the legislators, Athena Salmon, who formerly represented the Tempe area, asked me if I had ever considered running, and I had not at that point. So that is really when the conversation started to percolate, both in my mind and then with family and close friends, mentors. The first conversation with my family, they were a little confused about, well, why would you want to do that? Why would you want to be a public figure? And of course, there's also the risks that come to your safety. In this current political environment, especially.
Yeah.
But in that moment, we had just gone through the pandemic,
Yes.
where we all saw ways that the government let us down and failed. We all saw how rent was being increased significantly across the valley. Income disparities were just worsening as people are now working 2-3 jobs and still can't really keep up with bills. And I had really had the opportunity to get to know many of these legislators. And I knew that there were some people serving in the legislature who did not have the community's best interests at heart.
Yes.
And ultimately, I decided if those people are not going to fight for the most vulnerable members of our community in this crucial moment of American history, then we need to come for those seats. And that's really what drove me to put my name in.
Yeah, absolutely. I get so much passion just from the way you speak, is because, again, there's kind of this internal, for me, this fire of like, anytime I hear someone who's just truly about the community and really wants to put a good foot forward and really help. Again, this there's a saying that I really hold to heart, and it's the communities are built by those who plant trees who know that they won't sit underneath the shade of. And that's that. And it's one of those things that I took to heart, that I was like, yeah, there are a lot of things that I won't be a part of, but what I can do is plant the seeds to help the next generation. And that's something that I feel wholeheartedly about. It's like, if there is something that I can help not only my son's generation, but my grandson's generation and those that come after me, I want to do that, because I feel like that's the most important part. It's not about just me. It's about those that come after us. And if I could, the things that I vote for, the things that I believe in, I just truly feel like that's something that I just want to make the best part of my life, the legacy that I leave behind. And so for when I hear things like that from politicians and other people, like, business owners, entrepreneurs, nonprofits, like it truly makes my heart grow. Now, there are some negative things that come with this world. Of course, there will always be that part, but it's like those who fight, those who make a difference are like yourself, truly inspire those who are still standing on like the middle ground, like who are still like on the fence of things. Hearing your voice, hearing how much emotion comes from it, it really propels me to stand up and say, yes, she's right. She's absolutely in the right about certain things. And I stand by her. So thank you again, just to kind of show that side of yourself. I will kind of, I know that there's certain things that I just don't, there's a lot of things that we could discuss. Of course, Arizona is a big changing melting pot that is growing on an exponential scale every day. I would like to kind of ask, as far as like from that House of Representative point and going into now like the senator mode, what was that experience like? Because it's different. I imagine that there are a little bit changes here and there, but I mean, I would love to understand what it means to go from one side to this other particular side.
Yes. So for those who don't know, Arizona has 2 chambers. So we have the House of Representatives and the state Senate. There are 30 legislative districts across the state, and every district has 1 senator and 2 representatives. Okay. So I served in the House of Representatives for 2 years, which is 1 term, 1 election cycle. Yeah. And the next election that was coming around, my state senator, Ana Hernandez, decided she wanted to run for the Phoenix City Council. So she asked me to step up to run for her open seat in the state Senate.
Okay.
I definitely thought long and hard about it to ensure that it was the right move for me, and most importantly, that it's what the community wanted.
Yes.
And after many conversations with trusted leaders in our community, we decided to make this move. So we announced our campaigns on the same day, she for city council, me for the state Senate. And we both won, which is very exciting. And I think one of the biggest differences is that there are less senators. So before, I could kind of split up the workload between constituents that have questions and need support. I could split that up with my seatmate, is how we call it, because there's two representatives. Now in the Senate, those inquiries only come to me. I can still rely on my housemates to help out with certain inquiries, but there definitely is a lot more outreach. Also, a lot more outreach from lobbyists, because in the Senate, there's only 30 votes. So they don't have as much wiggle room to lose people on certain bills.
Yeah.
And that has been really interesting to see, because for me, I'm always going to vote on bills when they how they best align with my community. If my community doesn't want it, I'm not going to be an easy vote for these lobbyists to secure. If it's a good thing and I've done the analysis and I recognize that it will have a positive benefit for people, that is when I will support a bill. And so the hounding from lobbyists in the Senate is definitely more intense.
Absolutely. That's what I keep, that's what, if you look at entertainment in movies and TVs and things like that, you start to see that a little bit more prevalent if you're paying attention to that kind of stuff, especially when it comes to things that deal with the politics of the world. And it's just one of those things that's highlighted, I think, in more modern episodes and more modern pieces of entertainment. But as you start to learn and realize, it's like, not everyone has they have a vested interest in something that is being brought to them by, big lobbies. And just, again, it's this overwhelming of like pressure and like to, I don't know, moral value, things like that, where it's just like, again, do I vote this and take away this other thing? And one door closes, another one opens. So it's sort of this back and forth. And it's just so, to me, I'm like, it would cause me to have heart palpitations just to even have someone come up to me and be like, hey, look, Jose, you got a choice here, and just to back me into a corner, because that's something that I don't deal well with that kind of pressure. But again, I love that there are individuals out there that are very decisive, very intuitive, and very knowledgeable about these sort of things. And that comes from your background and being in journalism. So that's where I'm going to lead us down, is you're a big social media person. And I imagine that comes from, again, one part of the writing, one part of the journalism side. Why did you, or what about that social media aspect and being heard through that lens is vital and important, not only to your constituents, but also to like what you're trying to do today?
Right. Yeah. So I will admit, so I do use social media, and TikTok is by far my largest platform. I have about 60,000 followers. When I first started my campaign, I recognized that social media was important, but the big, real important thing in a campaign is knocking on doors and talking to voters face to face.
Yes.
I figured I could use TikTok to maybe solicit donations from people who agreed with my platform and wanted to throw some money my way.
Yeah.
And so I started to use it for that purpose. And pretty soon, I started knocking on doors in my community, and people opened the door because they recognized me from TikTok.
Yes.
And that is where I really realized, like, this is an incredibly powerful platform to meet voters where they are.
Yes.
There's a big misconception that TikTok is only for young people. That's not the case. There are so many middle-aged people who regularly use TikTok, and they vote.
Yes.
And when I won the election in 2022, I knew that I needed to continue to invest in this platform because it could help me achieve my policy goals, and it helps bring more transparency to the state legislature. Yes. So there are so many people who are not as informed about the state legislature. They might know a lot about their city council. and they can call up their city councilman when, the trash is late or whatever. And they might know a lot about Congress and all of the circus that goes on in Washington, D.C. But the state legislature is this black box where very important decisions are made that impact our everyday lives. So I started to use TikTok to go live from the House floor to give updates about what was happening behind the scenes, and even to ask my TikTok following, how do you think I should vote on certain bills? Because you're right, that moral question, those moral questions come into play. Some of these bills are not just black and white. They can be very challenging to vote on. There is no maybe button on the House floor. And so I would start to ask people, how do you feel? And more, I had people, including some of the pages that work at the Capitol, to bring the representatives things that we need. They're mostly college students. I had one of the pages come up to me and say, one of my buddies at college who does not pay attention to politics at all told me about your TikTok. And they were like, do you know her? And I was like, yes, I do. And I was like, okay, this is really important because our people in Arizona are hungry for knowledge, for civic education, and to participate in the process. Yeah. And I figured if that appetite is out there, I have a responsibility to continue to feed it.
Yeah, I love that. I love the story about, like, again, we sometimes forget that's like, not only do older people participate in social media, but also the fact that's like even further than that, they are around the younger generation, and the younger generation helps them and influences them just as much as they traverse the social media side. I think one of the things that I imagine, I'm hoping, like, there's like a youngster helping out a grandparent who that lives in the household that they live in, and they show them TikToks all day long. Like, here, look at this thing, and I know for a fact it's like, if you can get at least one of them, and it's so beautiful that it turned into that, where it's like you start opening, like when you start making the rounds of like, I need my constituents to see me face to face. Some of them might be fearful because they don't know a stranger that's going to come to their door. But if they can put a picture or a face to who this is knocking on my door, oh, absolutely. Especially when it's someone on TikTok, and it's like, there's like literally it. For me in particular, so I follow you, and we've had this conversation at the last thing where it's like, I used you as an example for me to educate myself on that side when it came time to vote, and how even with the judges that we put into place in our court system, you were very much a journalist and open about that. These judges tend to do this. These judges, be aware, are doing this when they're voting, or doing this when they're doing their job. So be aware of who you are putting in. So I took that to heart, and everything that you brought up, I did secondary research on. I made sure that when I put my pen to that vote, I am putting my whole heart into putting that individual into office. It's like, I didn't, and then when I found out that you were the person that I follow, I was like, it didn't dawn on me. I thought you were just like, again, I try not to be a fan, or like try to like annoy being the fan, but it's like, again, I couldn't help myself and just endear myself to say, thank you. Your posting who you are and who you represent affected this individual on a grander scale, because I chose to do the research that you brought to the table, that you were being vulnerable about, and just sharing that was like, I felt good, because again, it's like, when you don't know what the ripple effect is, but when I can be the person who brings back and to say, yes, you ripple affect my life. And hopefully the future, I mean, like my little guy is better off for it, because you've given yourself and you've given the opportunity for those to be well aware and informed of what's going on. And so social media helped during that period. And
thank you, Jose. I really appreciate you saying that. And I'm so grateful that you were able to make use of those videos. I everybody deserves to be able to have the information they need to cast an informed vote. And sometimes the political parties don't do a good job of providing that information. You might see a road sign, but a road sign isn't really going to tell you all the nitty-gritty things behind that measure. So it really means a lot that you were able to make use of that.
Well, and of course I have to just touch upon this because you brought this the insight of like there's a good and there's a bad to this social side. And one of the hard things that I have to bring up is, again, what you've gone through recently, especially with just informing people about what they need to know. And the time of today, we are discussing, immigration. You were on an episode of an immigration podcast, and it was so scary for me to hear that someone who is just trying to do her job and just trying to inform her constituents of what's going on in her neck of the woods and what she represents as a whole for these people to be well informed that there's something going on in your neighborhood that you should be well informed about, and that in itself caused your job to be at risk. And I just was like, man, you're a strong person, and the fact that you keep fighting for this and you keep striving for wanting to inform people that, again, these are things that you hear about every day or that you are well informed about, but not everyone else is well informed about. And these are things that they should know. So again, will you give us a little bit of insight on, again, I don't want to be the person who's like saying this is what's happening to her, but I would love to hear from your side of like, you put out a post and that got you in trouble.
Yeah. So thank you, first of all, for your empathy and compassion, because it has been an incredibly challenging time personally for me. So what happened was that there were masked armed men who showed up at a school in our community, and it was presumed that they were ICE agents. And the thing was that they were outside of a school, right? I'm an auntie to 6 kids. When I hear that, no matter what someone's immigration status is, to know there's a masked armed man on campus is going to cause concern. So I simply reshared a post about this. There was no identifying information. There was no photographs that were taken. It simply stated that ICE was potentially near a school in South Phoenix. And a far-right troll account that some people might know, they're called Libs of TikTok, they decided to exaggerate this post and to put a target on my back. It ended up going viral and resulting in the Senate president, my colleague, Warren Peterson, calling for me to be prosecuted by federal authorities. And then later, another one of my colleagues, Jake Hoffman, filed an ethics complaint to have me expelled from the state legislature. If they are not able to expel me, they are asking for me to lose my access to the building, lose my office, my assistant, and my parking spot, which all of those things belong to the people of Maryvale and Glendale, right? The people of Maryvale and Glendale chose me to be their senator, and to try to remove me means that our voters are disenfranchised and lose their representation. So that's really what needs to be highlighted here. But, this is an attack on free speech. And that is another thing, is that there is well-precedented court history that reporting about law enforcement activity, right, the way that the news media does every single day, is entirely protected by the First Amendment. So it's very clear this is a targeted political attack on me. But my concern lies in, there were death threats that came to my office. There were threats of sexual violence, just horrific things that people were calling and leaving voicemails after this went viral. But the fear that I felt in that moment cannot compare to the fear that our communities are feeling right now, whether they are mixed status or whether they are 100%, a United States citizen family who just happens to be brown and are worried about being racially profiled. That fear is very real. And no family deserves to be separated and living in terror. And I believe all kids should be able to go to school and in peace and not having to be fearful in their learning environment. So I really am continuing to stay grounded in the belief that I am fighting for people to have basic dignity and be treated with human rights and respect.
Mhm.
And whatever ends up happening, I will know that I have been standing on the right side of history.
Absolutely. There was something that I overheard, or just kind of like, I think I was listening to, where it's like, again, history is going to be written, and it doesn't look kindly on those who stand on the wrong side of it. But it's, again, it's those like you, who really just want to make a difference. That's like, it's sometimes it's a footnote, but it's also just so important because it's your life. It's someone who cares enough to, again, as someone like myself, who, like, you brought this up, where it's like 100% my status is, it's like I'm a citizen of the United States, but I look the way I look, and people assume certain things about my life. That I was, again, during the time of Sheriff Joe and SB, I forget the number, where they 1070. It's like I feared just going home, like from ASU to Glendale. I feared being pulled over, because easily enough, they, like, the stories that were coming out and the news reports that were coming out, it's just like, I know the way I look. I'm a tall brown man that's like, but I'm well spoken, and hopefully, I don't know. It was just a terrifying time for someone, again, who just looks the way I do. And it was so unfair at the time. But yeah, it was, again, I look back on it. I was like, I I just want so much better for this state and for our community, to realize it's like there are people who are truly innocent in all of this and do not deserve any of this kind of treatment. And it's just amazing what, I don't know, what we struggle through on a daily basis, and have to come to these, I don't know, spats and disagreements that cause people to not only feel threatened in their business and their what they do for a living, but also just in their own homes. And so it's tough, but I go back and I have hope, because individuals like yourself really do make a difference and really are striving and really are making waves and just really causing true effect on those around them and in their community. So kudos to you. I will go into my last bit of what I was telling you off air about. It's like what I wanted to focus on your daily life now, where you're in the midst of moving, but also it's this little thing about the housing market that we are dealing with as an overall whole of a city, because of, I don't know, there's a lot of things that are, because the population is growing. There is a very lack of, I think something that you brought up, like townhomes and duplexes and things like that, that, again, as far as we've come, there are still lack of provisions for those who are unhoused, on top of, again, the one thing that, I look at your social media, it's like a 1 hour sitting for an 8 hour period on bus stops in one of the hottest cities in the United States is it almost borderline asinine, but it's also just a sign that you posted on your social media that I was like, wow, it blows my mind. It's just so weird to me to see those types of things, because I deal with it on a deal. I walk by those who are unhoused and I feel for them. I empathize for them. And I wish I had more to give, but I also know that this city is striving for more. I want to hear from you and your struggle with this kind of scenario, especially the fact it's like we're growing at an exponential rate as a city, and like there are a tech giant being put into the outskirts. It doesn't mean that they're going to be housing for their employees, or like there will be enough housing for their employees. And I just, again, I look at all of the growth that's happening. Can this be sustained?
Right. Yeah, it's a huge problem and it is incredibly complex housing policy in the state of Arizona. But one of the things I think is so important to remember is that it is all interconnected. So,
Yes.
regardless of someone's income level, right, you have young professionals in potentially high paying jobs who cannot afford to save their money because rent is so expensive. So, they
Yes.
are not going on to become homeowners. We also have a huge shortage of homes. There's not enough homes being built for the number of people moving here. So that leads to prices rising. And then you have people in the middle, think of teachers, firefighters who cannot afford to live in the communities where they work.
Yeah.
And from there, you have people that are stuck in subsidized housing, low income housing, again, still can't save money or find a good paying job to
Mhm.
be able to move on to unsubsidized housing. And that all trickles down. It's like a ladder, a housing ladder,
Yeah.
where, and eventually you get to the bottom of people who have been evicted and then can just not get back on their feet. So they're living on the streets.
Yeah.
And all these issues compounding on top of each other, we need different solutions on all levels. But it became very real for me because I was renting a single family house that I could no longer afford. And when it came time to go look for another place to live with a cheaper rent, I really wanted to live in a townhome or a duplex,
Yeah.
something that was freestanding, or maybe I shared a wall with a neighbor, but could also have a backyard. And I could not find any of those options. So many of those townhomes were either very, very old, just didn't make sense for
Mhm.
me and for what I
Mhm.
needed, or they just weren't available. They were way in central Phoenix or downtown Phoenix, which is far away from Maryvale,
Yeah.
the district I serve. So the only options are really these giant luxury apartment complexes, which
Yeah.
everybody knows that these complexes are calling themselves luxury and they ain't luxury, but they're
Yeah.
charging luxury prices.
Yes.
And so it's like there's not enough options and there are also not enough pathways to homeownership. I'm 32 and born and raised here. I cannot afford to own a home in the state where I currently govern. The
Right.
average age of a homeowner nationwide now is 38 years old. So let's hope that in the next 6 years, I'll be able to have the savings I need, and maybe the market will stabilize that I can actually afford a down payment. But this is not sustainable, and we need solutions. We've been able to bring a few different solutions at the legislative level in a bipartisan manner, which I'm very proud of, but we have much further to go.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I look at my own situation. I'm very blessed and lucky to have, I was able to afford this home. My wife and I at the time we were just newly engaged and we were downtown. We were at a triplex
Okay.
and that was, it's tough. After a while, you just want some own privacy. We were sharing two walls with other individuals, but also on top of that, we were tired of paying for, like, again, I get it. Landlords do what they can with the time that they can to fix up the houses. But we were requesting fixes and not getting the
Mm.
response back that we were wanting. So we just took it upon ourselves, like, just need to buy something. And this was before the pandemic. We got very lucky to find this place. And I look at it now at the overall what's going on, and it I'm so, like, happy. I'm like, oh, I got in just before the door closed, essentially. But again, it's like people like my brother who is living with my parents and is trying to save up the money to afford his first home. And I respect that, and I also know how challenging it is. I love them to death, and it's so hard to see them struggle through that and see others also struggle through that. And I was looking at a recent article and the statistics of, like, oh yeah, there's a cool down, and now there are some places, but these places are like Sun City West. I'm like, are you talking about the outskirts of the city where there's like hardly anybody or hardly any kind of like places for young people to go out and like seek entertainment and things like that, where it's it again blows my mind about these sort of things that again we have to take into account that this is a growing city and we have to try our best to endear ourselves to those who are around us, who are our citizens, who are our partners, who are people and neighbors who are going to make an effect on the community. So
Right.
I applaud you and your other teammates and members in the Senate that are trying their best to make these changes and try hard so that, I mean, I think one of the ones that stands out was like the casita law that passed that you can
Yeah.
now build. And that's something I'm in that part of the city. And it's very nice that I can now go ahead and do that for not only my own family member, but like my grandmother's getting a little bit older. I would love for her to have a wonderful place to, really last a portion of her life to have family around her and just really see my son grow up and see that. And again, it was an opportunity that came up. I'm like now thinking about it more prevalently of like, oh yeah, I can now try and build something and that will be able to be used by not only my family, but also, let's say if there is an opportunity to start an Airbnb and be able to pay for this home for our family. And those things really do make an effect. So if you can give my thank you to those members and just who've made that vote, I would really appreciate that. I go on to now ask the last bit of our portion of this conversation is just future goals and looking towards the future. You brought up being an aunt to six children, and I know that's probably something that's on your mind of like leaving something for them. But again, ultimately, is there a goal for maybe even further status into maybe the Washington side, or is there something else that you are very passionate about that maybe just stands out as far as what you stand in right now?
Yeah, well, I love state level policy. I really do. I worked for a little bit at the National ACLU as well. So, and in that, I realized I just do not like federal policy, and
Mhm.
Congress is a circus show. So,
Yes.
for me, my heart is in the state legislature here in
Yeah.
Phoenix. I, by law, could serve 8 years or 4 terms in the
Mhm.
state Senate before I'm termed out. So if the people of Maryville and Glendale will have me for all of those terms, I will be so incredibly honored. But really, for me, the important thing is to continue to serve my community in the way that is best for people, and to make the biggest impact that I can with the time that I do have in office. So
Yeah.
our terms are only 2 years. So every 2 years, I'm going to try to do the most good that I can and likely will run for reelection until those 4 terms are up.
Yeah.
But, I think local politics, even areas like school board, are areas that I'm so passionate about to make a difference for the issues that I care about that are right here in our backyard and
Yeah.
continuing to be accessible to my community because building that bridge between local government and the community has
Mhm.
really been the most fulfilling thing for me to help
Beautiful.
people feel empowered in the halls where decisions are being made. So long term, I just hope to do as much good as I can for our community in Maryvale.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time, Senator. I really do appreciate it. Again, if I can just leave a little bit of like more appreciation that I've already given you, eternally, I'm grateful for your voice and just again, not only in the process of politics in this whole Arizona area, but also the fact that you've given me a little bit of your time. I am truly grateful for because this is again, it's not from a lack of trying, but I have not had a politician on our show. It is more of just this finding the right one. And I think having you as the very first example of that truly means a lot to those who are listening and also those who are going to come in the future for later shows and episodes. So again, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. I do leave the platform for the end of the conversation for you to let everyone know where they can follow you social media wise. If you do want to give everyone a mailing address or anything like that for your constituents, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Jose. I'm so honored to be here and spend time with you. Thanks to everyone for listening. You can find me on my website, ortizforaz.com, or you can find me on any social media platform except for X. I just left X. My handle is at Analise Ortiz. So please follow me on TikTok, Instagram, Blue Sky, Facebook, and I will be more than happy to engage. And thank you for the support.
I do want to mention those who are social media fiends about like your TikToks and your reels are amazing. They're well crafted, well done. I just, again, there's such an influence of like female representation and in the world of politics is definitely something that's like prevalent on your pages. And it's so incredible to see those individuals because I don't hear about them every day. And just to be able to encounter them on just a fun little like, hey, nice to meet you. Like, it's one of those beautiful moments of like, wow, you really know, you really get it and you really understand it. And it's really incredible because they are stepping stones into finding further representation. And it's really cool to see. So I encourage everyone, please go follow her. And it's we end every conversation. I'll do my outro. You can hear every episode of our podcast at findingarizonapodcast.com. And social media wise, we are under Finding Arizona Podcast. Last but not least, we end every conversation with the kisses, hugs, and belly rubs to our four-legged friends. And we will see you next time. Bye-bye.